get started. All right, so excellent. Thanks very much. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining
Oh,
us for this episode
thanks for
of
having me.
Coffee with an Estate Lawyer. I know you got your
For
mug,
sure.
and I got mine.
Oh,
Mine
absolutely.
was actually a gift from one of my kids. It's got his name on it, and again, it
Super cute.
ties into our theme of the day. So first of all, I just want to welcome everybody to this episode of Coffee with an Estate Lawyer. I'm going to introduce myself and our guest. My name is Arin. I'm one of the co-founders of Epilogue. And what we do at Epilogue, in case anyone is hearing about us for the first time today, is we're an online will platform. We allow people to create their own wills and other estate planning documents like powers of attorney from the comfort of their own home, completely online, in as little as 20 minutes without having to go see a lawyer or pay lawyers' fees. And what we do is every so often we have this program called Coffee with an Estate Lawyer, where we talk about things related to estate planning or financial planning to educate people. We pick some topics that are important to our community, and we're just really here to help educate people about estate planning and about financial planning and all the things that they can do to sort of get things organized for the benefit of their loved ones. So our guest here today, Sunmeet Hanspal, is a wealth advisor at Wealthsimple, and he's coming to talk to us today about RESPs. I was playing just before everyone joined on. I was playing Aretha Franklin, RESP, ECT. And it's actually, I mean, Sunmeet and I were just talking before we went live here, and I said, like, I read something really interesting about Aretha Franklin just yesterday. So playing that music is really appropriate for a couple of reasons. We're going to be talking about RESP, but I read that Aretha Franklin, she passed away, I think, a couple of years ago now, and initially they thought that she didn't have a will, that she hadn't done any planning, and then it came out that they found a handwritten will. I think it was in her couch, and so after, months after she'd passed away, they found this will handwritten by her, and there were questions about that, and then the story got stranger when they found a second handwritten will and a third handwritten will. And what I read just yesterday is now a fourth will has come up, and this one was
Wow.
apparently drafted by a lawyer, and it's at the lawyer's office on his computer, but it was never signed. And so another
Man.
wrinkle in the story. And so that really brings us to what we're talking about, which is really making sure to get your financial planning in order and your estate planning in order, because you're not doing it for you, you're doing it for the people that are left behind, and you want to make sure they get everything in order. So before we jump in, Sunmeet, maybe you want to just tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do professionally and how you help people manage their financial affairs these days.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. And thank you for having me. And I think that story speaks to just how we should be well informed about these topics. And hopefully we can shed some more information and light in regards to those topics today. Like I said, my name is Sunmeet Hanspal. I'm a wealth advisor with Wealthsimple. And basically at Wealthsimple, what we try and do is we try to utilize technology and this call. And I've been in the wealth management industry for about 9 years now. Prior to coming to Wealthsimple, I was an investment advisor for 4 years or 5 years with a wealth management firm. And RESPs were a prevalent part of the conversation whenever we used to sit down with families that had children. Um,
Awesome. So that's great. Thank you very much for that. This is the beauty of live television, which I love. There seems to be some cutting out, but I don't know whether it's your end or my end. So I would say we'll press on, and we'll the show must go on, as they say. So we'll just keep having the discussion as best we can. If you're having any issues hearing me, just let me know, and we'll sort these out if we need to. So like Sunmeet said, we're going to be talking about RESPs today. And where I'm going to start this conversation is something that I often say when it comes to estate planning, which is there are a lot of terms Oh, I think we might have just lost him. So I'm gonna, I'll keep talking. I'll do this intro, and we'll see if we can get Sunmeet back. Um, One of the things that I always talk about when it comes to estate planning is that there are terms like beneficiary and trust. And oh, Sunmeet's going to come back in here. All right, Sunmeet's going to join us again. We'll see if we can. All right, we're back.
Sorry about that. Oh, I think we're back.
All
Sorry
right,
about that.
awesome. Okay, good. I can hear you
All
now.
right.
Excellent. So,
Perfect.
um, the way, one of the things that I say, and Daniel says when we talk to a lot of people about estate planning, is that there's all these terms in estate planning that people have heard before, but they don't really know what they mean. So
Mhm.
someone talks about an executor or a beneficiary or a trust. These are words that kind of are out there, but nobody really knows what they mean until they're explained to them. And I think that a lot of that
Mhm.
applies in the financial planning world as well. What makes
Right.
it worse in the financial planning world, I think, is that everything is an acronym. So no one ever says the whole
Mhm.
word, right? So you hear about
Right.
GICs or ETFs or RRSPs or TFSAs, right? Like these are things that just get thrown around, and a
Right.
lot of people, they think that everyone else knows what they mean, but they don't know. They're the only one that doesn't know what these things mean, right? And so
Right. Right.
RESP is potentially one of those other things. It's just four letters that are strung together. And so what we're here to do today is to demystify that, to explain what it is. So really, the first basic question, if you can explain to our viewers today, is what is an RESP?
Yeah, for sure, Aaron. I mean, you're absolutely right about that. And to give the most basic and simple explanation, RESPs are registered education savings plans. They are a way for individuals that are looking for saving for their children's education uh, to basically utilize a tool or a vehicle that provides certain advantages to them. So just like we have RRSPs for retirement savings plans and investment some benefits come along with the actual plan as well, and we can kind of get into that later in the conversation. But just at a high level, some of those benefits include tax-free growth within the account when you're investing. Another benefit of an RESP is the government grants that you attract when you're contributing to the plan as well. So at just a very high level, it's a registered education savings plan meant for the saving of children's education.
That's great. And, when I mention RESPs to new parents that have never heard of them before and they ask those
Hmm.
questions like, what is it? It's one of those things that almost sounds too good to be true, right? Especially when you're talking
Right.
about, one of the things you mentioned, which is the government grants. So maybe you can
Hmm.
explain exactly what that benefit is. How do I get this benefit? What does somebody have to do to open an RESP, and how do you start benefiting from it?
Yeah, so opening an RESP is quite simple. I mean, the most financial institutions, most wealth management firms, such as Wealthsimple, we are a financial services firm, obviously. We offer the ability to open an RESP with our company, and we're basically known as the provider of that particular plan. So any company you sign up with, that's the provider of the plan. The government grant, essentially how that works is the government, it's really cool because it's better than saving money in like a savings account for this particular goal because what's happening is as you're contributing to the RESP, the government is essentially matching your contribution up to a certain limit on an annual basis. So when it comes to this particular account, what happens is the government grant that you're attracting is about 20% of your contribution on an annual basis, up to a maximum of $500 per year. Uh, and in order to receive that, when you start depositing into the account and start contributing, as a contributor, what you can do is you can put in $2,500 on an annual basis, and that will attract the maximum $500 from the government as well. So just at a very high level, that's one of the major benefits of the RESP.
So basically, if I have $2,500 to invest and I can open an RESP, do I have to have a kid to open an RESP? If I want to open one for my nephew, could I open an RESP for my nephew?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for individual RESP plans, we can do that. Essentially, how that works is the subscriber or the owner of the plan, that individual can vary. So you can be parents, it can be siblings, it can be aunts and uncles, it can be friends, or there's a family RESP plan, and that's a little bit different, where the subscriber or the owner, I know it's a little bit more technical language, but the subscriber or the owner of a family RESP plan has to be related through blood or adoption, right? So there are some differences there. But for an individual RESP plan, it's pretty flexible in terms of who can open up the account and who can contribute for the child or the beneficiary.
And so if there's multiple kids, does each kid get
Mhm.
their own RESP account? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, for if there are multiple kids, you can open individual RESPs for those kids and go about it that route. Or you can utilize a family RESP plan where under that particular plan, you can have multiple children within the same family, right? And there are some benefits in regards to opening up a family RESP plan as opposed to keeping it individual. Um, with the family RESP plan, basically what happens is the contributions that you're putting in and the investment growth on top of those contributions, they can basically be distributed between the children the way that the subscriber or the owner of the account wants. So let's say, for example, one child has more ambitious education goals and may need more funding for their education at a later date. You, as the subscriber or the owner of the plan, can maybe allocate more of the funds within the family RESP towards the child who will need more funding later on, as opposed to the child that maybe needs less funding, right? So there is a little bit more flexibility from that perspective. And both children also benefit from the growth within the investment account as well.
So that's great. I mean, that's really interesting. It's really good information to know, and that makes a lot of sense from the family plan perspective. Now, the grant that you were talking about, which is really
Hmm.
such an attractive feature. So if I have $2,500 to
Right,
invest, I can put it into the RESP that I've opened for my child, and the government will match, like you said, 20%. So that's $500 that they'll put in. Is that a one-time shot,
right.
or is that I can do that every year, every 6 months? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. So that is an annual government grant that you will attract, right? And essentially how it works is each child is allowed up to $500 in government grants for one particular year. And at the same time, each child has a maximum amount that they can accumulate in government grants over the life of the plan. So that maximum amount for per child is $7,200, right? So as you're contributing to the plan and depositing your $2,500 per year, if you choose to max out that government grant, um, what you have to keep in mind is that you're going to be attracting that $500 maximum per year. And once you reach the $7,200 limit, your contributions will no longer be attracting a government grant at that point.
So I could still put in more money. I could put in as much as I want. I'm just not going to get any more grants.
Exactly. So, and that's a great point that you bring up because for individuals that do have ambitious education goals for their kids and they want to save more, and at the same time, I mean, the cost of education is quite high these days anyway, right? And it's increasing almost every year. I think the average cost for undergraduate programs in Canada is about on tuition, sorry, boarding, right? If you're living on residence, books, things of that nature. So you have to take all of those things into consideration. Um, the thing is, you can also add on top of that as well, right? So once you've reached the limit for contributing and attracting your government grant, you can add additional funds into the account. And for each child, the maximum contribution limit over the lifetime is 50,000, right? So you can 50,000 in your own contributions per child.
Okay, so there was a little bit of cutting out, so I just want to confirm. I mean, obviously, the cost of educating child's post-secondary education is only going up, and so I think you said that there is a maximum grant that the government will give over the lifetime of the RESP. That's $7,200, and then the
Right.
maximum, is it the maximum that I can contribute per child is $50,000?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So the
Okay.
child has $50,000 that can be contributed into their plan. Um, in order to get that government grant, that $7,200 over the life of the plan, essentially the contributor or the subscriber would have to put in $36,000 over the life of the plan,
Hmm.
right? So $2,500 each year for 14 and a half years will give you $7,200 in government grants. And then you have an additional $14,000 in contribution room that you can put into the account. And at the same time, all of those contributions and grants will also incur growth from the investments inside of the account as well.
Right, and that growth, like a TFSA or an RRSP, that's tax free, right? Like that's
Right.
no one's paying tax on that as it's growing, which really unlocks, I guess, the power of the compounding, right? That you're not having to
Exactly.
pay tax on the funds that are accumulating; those just continue to grow in the account. I mean, that's great. It's a really powerful investment vehicle. It sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the power of compounding growth in a tax-free nature, it's extremely important. And like I said at the beginning of the conversation, I mean, uh, this vehicle is specifically for education planning. So, I mean, if you're thinking about saving for kids' education and you're not utilizing it, it's a great tool to have in your financial plan. And being able to take advantage of some of those benefits can really add more to the planning component of it for sure.
Okay, so I've got a question. I feel like I'm speaking on behalf of lots of parents with this one. You have a
Sure.
kid and life gets very, very busy, and you're not always thinking about things like this. You might not even know that these tools exist, right? And so a year goes by or 2 years go
Hmm.
by, and you haven't contributed to an RESP. Maybe you haven't even opened an RESP. Is it too late
Right.
to open the RESP? Have I lost out on my ability to contribute if I didn't open it for 2 years?
No, so that's a really good question, and it's important to address because sometimes what happens is maybe we are late and we spend a couple of years without saving in an RESP plan, but it's never too late to get started. And what you can do is you can open up the RESP plan, and in order to attract the government grants for the years that you've missed, what the government essentially allows is you can make that up 1 year at a time, right? So if you've missed 5 years of government grants, right, $500 per year for 5 years, what you can do is you can double your contribution for your existing year and the following years after that. And the government will basically reimburse you for those missed years 1 year at a time. So you can play catch up. It's just a little bit slower in terms of you can do a lump sum payment and attract all of your missed grants at once. It has to be 1 year at a time that it happens.
So what I'm hearing from you is that if I miss the window, if there's a couple years that I missed, the best time to open an RESP and to start investing is today, right? Because
Absolutely.
if I'm 4 years behind, let's say, and I can only catch up 1 year at a time, better to open that today when I can make a contribution for year five and then my missed contribution from year four. And then next year I
Right.
can make my contribution for year six and my missed contribution from year three. So after 4 years, if I
Right.
have enough money to invest, then I can basically catch up all those years that I missed. But if I wait another year before I open my RESP, then it's another year that I've missed, and it'll take me, an extra year to catch up on that.
Exactly. So the sooner you get started, the better it is. Obviously, you don't want to miss any more years in terms of government grant contributions, but at the same time, you're also missing out on investment growth as well, right? All those things go into consideration. The longer of a time horizon you have, the more savings will accumulate into your account, the more growth will accumulate into your account, and the better base you'll have when the child actually is beginning to post-secondary education.
Awesome. Okay, so I mean, we've talked a lot so far about how money gets in to the RESP, and we talked
Hmm.
about the government grants. We've talked about the tax-free growth and the compounding growth, um, and I mean, it sounds like such an incredible vehicle for saving if you expect your kids to pursue post-secondary education. So now let's talk
Right.
about the other side, right? What happens? How does the money come out? I know with an RRSP, it's not taxed on the way in. In fact, you get a deduction when you're putting money into your RRSP, and then when it comes out,
Hmm.
once you're retired, it's a retirement savings vehicle. It gets taxed on the way out. How does it
Right.
work for an RESP? Do I pay tax when the money I put into an RESP starts coming out?
So that's a good question. Within an RESP, we basically have three buckets, right? We have the contributions that you've made into the account, which are made with after-tax dollars. So you don't have to worry about any tax implications there when you're withdrawing from that portion of the account. We also have the growth portion, which is incurred through investment growth. Whatever your investment vehicle is, that's the growth portion of the account. Then you have the government grants that you've been accumulating in the account as well. So those are the three buckets. Now, the government get taxed under the beneficiary's name as income tax. So they're taxed in the beneficiary's hands at that point, right? And there's a couple of rules associated with EAP and how it works and how the withdrawal strategies work. Essentially, when your child does decide to go to post-secondary in their first year, in the first 13 weeks, what happens is you can only withdraw $5,000 from the EAP portion of the actual plan, which is the government grant and growth portion of the plan, for full-time programs. And it's $2,500 from the EAP portion for part-time programs. So you as a contributor, if you need more funds for that first 13 weeks of your child's education, you're going to withdraw money from the contribution portion of the plan. Um, at the same time, once the first 13 weeks are over, you have basically unlimited access to the EAP after that.
Okay, so there was a little cutting out there, so I'm just going to try to summarize
Yep.
and just tell me if I got it right. So the portion
Okay.
that is growing and that the government's giving you, so basically the benefit that you're getting from having this RESP, there is some tax when that comes out,
Right.
but that tax is paid. It basically becomes tax that's paid by the kids, not by you, right? So you don't have to worry about
Right.
getting a bigger tax bill when the money's coming out. On the basis that, when the kids are in school, they probably aren't earning any money, and or if they are, they're not earning a lot of money. So although they're going to have those
Right.
payments show up on their tax return, um, there's probably not going to be any tax to pay associated with that. So, and that's where it's different from an
Right.
RRSP, right? If an RRSP or a RIF, right? If those payments are coming out, they get added to your tax bill. They get added to your income. So it's kind of the same thing with an
Right.
RESP, but it gets added to your child's tax return, and odds are they're not paying any tax
Exactly.
anyways. That income is not enough to make them pay tax, and that's where one of the real benefits comes in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at the end of the day, I mean, sometimes it is prudent to maybe look into withdrawing the EAP portion as much as you can, which is the growth and the government grant portion. Sometimes what happens is students maybe take on a part-time job and their income tax bracket increases or the marginal tax rate increases at that point. So before that happens, maybe diving in and withdrawing from the EAP as much as you can is more of a strategy for individuals that are looking to dodge some of those tax implications there.
Yeah, so this relates, I think, to one of the questions that we got on Instagram. Somebody asked, "Is there a way to
Sure.
withdraw the government matches first when my child starts post-secondary?" So can you decide what pool you're taking out of?
Yeah, absolutely. You can. Um, but like I mentioned, there are some restrictions in the first 13 weeks, right? So in that first semester, when your child does go off to post-secondary, the first 13 weeks, you can only take out a maximum of $5,000 in EAP, which is once again government grant plus growth, investment growth within the account. And that $5,000 is for full-time programs, and then it's $2,500 for part-time programs. But after the first 13 weeks are complete, I mean, you can take out as much as you want from the EAP. Um, and because obviously the child is most likely in a lower marginal tax bracket, sometimes it does make sense to withdraw from that particular bucket as opposed to going into your own contributions first.
It sounds very much like, one of those times if you're unsure that, they should give someone like you a call, right? Because you could look at their current situation and say, okay, if this is the situation you're in, you have one
Right.
child and they're going this type of program and this is where you're at with your RESPs, it makes sense. That's really where the advice comes in. And so, and that's your specialty, as we know, which is great.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there's one more main topic that I want to cover, and we're getting close to our time. But being
Hmm.
Epilogue and doing what we do, which is helping people do their estate planning, one of the questions I have to
Right.
ask is what happens to your RESP or the RESP that you've opened for your kids if you pass away? I know
Yeah.
that with an RRSP or a TFSA, when you open them up, you actually fill out a form, and the form is
Hmm.
basically if I die this my RRSP goes to this beneficiary, my TFSA goes to that beneficiary. Does an RESP
Right.
work the same way? Is there a form that you fill out that says what happens to it? Does it just go to the kids? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Aaron. I mean, unfortunately, if that type of situation was to occur, our account gets that away or the owner passes away, you can have an option where if you have a joint subscriber on the plan, then the surviving subscriber basically takes over. But onto the estate of the individual that passed away. And it could be subject to probate fees and taxes at that point. So having a will, obviously, at that point makes a lot of sense. It provides more efficiency from an estate planning perspective. Um, and I'm sure you can touch a little bit more on that as well. Um, but that's how an RESP kind of functions. It's a little bit different from TFSAs and RRSPs, where you can't necessarily transfer the account over to someone if you pass away, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it's worth repeating. Like typically, when parents are opening RESPs for their own kids, they do it together, and so they're
Right,
jointly on the account. And so if one of them passes away, the RESP lives on. It still continues, and it's the other parent that can keep making contributions. But when there's only one subscriber, if somebody opens an account for their nephew and they're the only person contributing to it, or if one parent has already passed away, or if parents, if something happens to them and they pass away at the same time, and there's nobody to take over that account, that's kind of when the RESP collapses, for lack of a better term. Um,
yeah, right,
CRA's policy, it basically becomes part of the estate. It gets distributed, which might mean a couple things. It might mean that the kids don't get to benefit from the money that's been saved for them for education. The other thing it means is that all of the benefits that the
right,
government has given and all that tax-free growth, that kind of disappears and it's just all lost. And so a will is really the place to plan for an RESP. And even when I was a practitioner, I saw a
hmm,
lot of wills, and this wasn't even on the radar of a lot of lawyers necessarily. So I've seen many, many lawyer drafted wills where the parents have RESPs, but they're not actually addressed in the will itself. And one of the cool things that we've done very recently at Epilogue is we've actually added this as a feature. So if
sure,
somebody comes to do their will with Epilogue, and we'll ask them if they have an RESP, and if they do, they'll have the opportunity to put something in their will that makes sure that if something happens to them, the RESPs will continue. So that's a really neat thing that we've done recently,
right.
and I know that Wealthsimple has done such tremendous work in making investing in RESPs easy and affordable and accessible and digital, right? I mean, everything is digital these
Yeah,
days. And so the fact that new parents who I can speak from personal experience get very busy with life and lots of other things, to give them an easy way to open up and start investing in this amazing vehicle for their children's education is such a powerful
right.
tool. Um, and speaking of that, I'm not
Absolutely.
going to say too much. I'm not going to say too much more, but we do have next week, we're going to be making a very exciting announcement about all this stuff. So please stay tuned for that. And I think we're already over time, but this was great. I mean, really, I
Sure.
think that you've given everybody, so much to think about. I think anybody who watches this who has not already opened up an RESP for their own children, or maybe has a niece or nephew that does not yet have an RESP open for them, or a
Right.
grandchild. This is really good incentive to start that financial planning, and to, like you said, the earlier the better. If you didn't do it
Absolutely.
3 years ago when your kid was born, well, the next best time to do it is tomorrow. So you can give Sunmeet a call, and I'm sure he could guide you through the process of how to open an RESP and how to start saving for children's education.
Absolutely. I second that. I mean, it was a great conversation, Aaron, and I think that uh, these conversations should be had, and it is important to get the appropriate information out there. And it's also important to make sure that the platforms that people are using for financial planning or setting up their estate wills and things of that nature are easy and simple to use, and the language is understandable. So I think you guys are doing a great job of that as well, for sure. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Sanmeet, for joining us. We are going to post this on our IGTV, so anybody who's missed anything that we had to say will see that. And we're also, as we often do, we're going to do a blog on this. And so anyone who wants to read about RESPs will have the opportunity to do so on our blog. And I know that you guys at Wealthsimple have a lot of great RESP resources as well, so anybody can check those out too. But
Absolutely.
Sanmeet, thanks again. Thanks
For
for
sure.
joining us. And stay tuned next week. Big announcement from us.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you for having me. Take care.
Take care.